1. Let me start off by saying that this is going to be detailed. It happened just last night, and I remember everything very clearly. I use public transit all the time. In fact, I don't own a car because of how much I use it. I work in the inner city, but live a good 45 minutes from it. So I usually have to take a train and 2 buses to get home. Luckily for me, they ran until 2 a.m. on the weekends. Anyway, I work at the city library that doesn't close until midnight. The reason being because we have a lot of college students studying here. I've only worked there for about a month, so I haven't gotten to the point of recognizing regulars. I'm usually in the back, checking in books and whatnot, but last night I was in front at the counter. Basically, my job was to allow people to check out books and accept the $1 if they wanted to use the computer and didn't have a library card. One other person working with me was my boss, Theodore, who's 72 years old and refuses to retire. He's been working at the library for 30 years and constantly talks about how much he loves it. But because I was up front, he decided to be in back and left me alone to deal with anyone who walked in. At about 11 p.m., multiple people got up to leave, which left just one guy sitting in the corner of the room on his laptop. Various books and papers laid out in front of him. I assumed he was taking summer classes at the university, so I just sat behind my desk and played a game on my phone. At close, the guy was still there, and Theodore came up front to help me close. "Is he a regular?" I asked him. Theodore only nodded. Usually Theodore responds verbally, so it kind of creeped me out a bit. I then went up to the guy and told him we were closing. Now that I was closer to him, I got a better look at what he looked like. He had long brown hair and dark eyes. His teeth looked like he hadn't brushed them in years, and his lips were cut up. He immediately scared me. The look he gave me kind of made him seem caught off guard, but also very angry that I was basically kicking him out of the library. Either way, it had to be done. He stood up and slammed his books closed. I watched him stalk off out the door, leaving just Theodore and I in the library. I felt chills rushing up and down my spine as I walked back over to Theodore, who seemed to be just as off as I was. "He's always very angry. I'm very careful what I say to him," he told me. The feeling I got from the guy finally made sense. I didn't know why he scared me so much until Theodore had said that. I was just hoping that I didn't have to deal with him again. When I finally finished up closing, I walked out of the library, saying bye to Theodore, and walking down the large amount of steps up front. The walk to the bus stop I go to is only about 2 minutes, and the bus wasn't getting here until 12:30, so I had a bit of time to kill. I sat on the bench of the bus stop, putting in my headphones and listening to an audiobook. My headphones are noise cancelling, so I didn't notice someone sat on the bench next to me until I smelled smoke. I looked up to find the guy from the library, a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. The smoking explained his teeth and dry, cracking lips. As subtly as I could, I slipped a bit further away from him, hoping that he wouldn't notice and call me out for it. He only glanced at me before taking a very long drag of his smoke. I felt goosebumps everywhere in my body. I turned down the audiobook but kept my headphones in, so he wouldn't talk to me. He seemed just as angry as before, or maybe it was annoyed. I'm not exactly sure, but when it came time to stop his smoke out, he did it very loudly, which made me flinch. When the bus came, he got on first, practically threw the money at the bus driver, and went to the way back. I politely showed the driver my bus pass, to which he gave me a tight smile and began driving. I sat at the front, turning back up my audiobook and ignoring everything else. The train station came into view, and I almost leapt for joy out of the bus. My train left 2 minutes after my bus got there, so I always had to rush and push my way into the train car. The car was empty, and I thought I could finally get some peace with my night. But I saw a hand stop the doors from closing, and in walked the same fucking guy. I actually couldn't believe it. Every weekend I took the same buses and train, and have never once seen him. At the time, I chalked it up to a coincidence and hoped for the best. Hopefully his stop was next, or he didn't use the same bus that I had to next. I felt a panic attack rising on, but did my best to keep it at bay, which takes a lot out of me, considering the circumstances. I have a tendency to overthink things, so I kept telling myself it was pure coincidence. The guy sat in the road directly behind me, even though the entire thing was empty. He could have easily sat on the complete opposite side, but decided not to. It was at this point that I pulled out my phone and texted my sister, whom I live with. The text was simply, "If I'm not home by 1:45, call the police." Of course, she texted me back completely freaking out, which didn't help my situation because it just made me realize how much I should actually be panicking. I felt his eyes on me the entire time I was using my phone, and I just hoped he couldn't read what was on it because this was the only fucking time I regretted buying a Galaxy S6. Giant fucking screen, of course. "What the hell do you mean? Are you okay?" was one of the various text messages I received back. I only responded with a, "Yes, can you maybe meet me at the bus stop?" She agreed, and I locked my screen and tapped my leg against the floor anxiously. I could feel his breath down my neck, and it took everything in my power not to react. My fists were clenched together, and my bag was clutched tightly against my body in case I needed to run. "You're very pretty," I heard from behind me, which was when I couldn't keep myself from jumping. I turned and met eyes with the guy, beheld the grin on his face that reached from ear to ear. Cigarette smell emitted from his clothing, and I kept myself from gagging. I didn't expect him to speak to me at all, nor did I expect his voice to be so loud and frightening. "Thank you," I muttered back to him, tightening my grip on my things. "What's someone like you traveling out alone so late?" At this point, he had leaned forward from his seat and leaned against the one next to me, staring at me expectantly while I tried to think of something to say. My voice shook a lot when I said, just trying to get home." I now realize how stupid that was of me because that could have given him incentive to follow me all the way home. "Ah," he responded, chuckling a bit. "That's nice." His hand patted my shoulder roughly, which hurt me more than you would think. "Do you happen to have a boyfriend?" The long pause in the middle of the sentence left me with an eerie feeling residing in the bottom of my stomach. "I do," I whispered back to him. He only patted harder on my shoulder while laughing loudly. It was silent for a moment before he began talking again. I kind of drowned him out with my own panic because I didn't know if he was going to get on the next bus with me or not. When I finally alert my attention back on what he was saying, I only heard, "I just know that I'm better than he is." "Excuse me?" I responded. Since I ignored him, I didn't know the context of what he was saying. "No guy is as good as I am." He started leaning in closer to my ear. "I just know I could fuck you better than he ever could." Bile rose to my throat. I was completely and utterly terrified, and I was sure of it at this point. Nausea overtook my entire body, and I stood from my seat and got out at the stop just before the one I was supposed to get off at. I did it quick enough that he was caught off guard and didn't get off with me. However, I did get one last glance at him as he stared at me angrily through the window when the train started to move again. He mouthed words to me that I couldn't exactly make out. I just know they weren't very nice. When the train car was completely out of my sight, and I knew he couldn't see me anymore. I rushed to the bushes and hurled out all the food I had eaten that day. I then called my sister and asked her to get me at the stop I was at. It took her about 20 minutes, but she showed up and had me explain everything to her. Today I took the day off work to recoup my sanity, and will have day shifts from now on. Needless to say, I am not going to use public transport that late again. 2. It was 2008. I was 17, and I lived in a friendly neighborhood, and still live here. So we never locked the fence that surrounds my house, neither the front door of my house. We were so naive. It was Saturday, late night, early evening, around 5 a.m. I was getting home from a party, and when I was like 1 block away, I saw 2 guys painting something in my wall. I was a very conflictive teenager since I practiced boxing, and thought it was cool. Always picking up dumb fights and acting erratically. So I rushed there to confront them, but as soon as they saw me, they ran away. When I saw what they did, it seemed like some kind of glyph keys, but I didn't pay attention because I was too drunk to, so I went to sleep. Next day, my father covered that in paint. 1 week passed. Let's say it was a Saturday, and I remember being at my computer, which has a window behind it that allows you to watch the front yard. It was around 4 a.m., and I saw 2 guys painting the wall of my house again. And they ran after they finished, some kind of glyph keys again. I didn't pay attention again, because I thought there were some guys trying to express themselves. What the fuck? I didn't care, actually. The only thing was that we had to paint the wall again. I'm going to tell this thing from my point of view, then I will tell you what really happened. So, the Sunday around 8 p.m, it happened. I was talking via MSN, too old, LOL, with my girlfriend, and suddenly my sister, which at that year she was like 7 years old, came up from the stairs trying to talk desperately. It was something like, "Toby, that's me, there's someone in the house." My parents and her were on the first floor, me and my brother upstairs. I was so confused that I didn't know what to think. My first thought was that someone famous came to visit us. I have no idea why I thought this. And she was excited and didn't know how to react. The thing is, when I got up from the computer to see what the fuck was going on, I looked downstairs to see my father coming up, with a guy I've never seen in my life. He had a gun pointing at him. I didn't know how to react. I've always said that if something like that happened, I'd attack whatever is at my range. But when I saw my dad like that, I just froze. Couldn't do anything. And the guy proceeded to tie us with some PS2 joysticks I had in my house, and started asking questions. Where's the money? Where are the jewels? He was mad at first, but when we told him that we didn't have anything like that we were broke, and we were moving out of the neighborhood, it was a lie. He looked like he'd been framed or tricked by someone, by the look of his face. All I listened to was my mother screaming downstairs. I didn't know what was going on, but I could be sure there was more than one guy at my place. I asked the man to go and get my mother, so she could see we were okay. And that way, I could make sure that she's okay too. He agreed. When he went downstairs, I could only tell my little sister that everything was going to be okay, so she could calm down and stop crying. Me? I couldn't believe what I was going through, and I never thought something like that could happen to us. Anyway, we heard some noises and thought he was coming up again. Footsteps and some shouts from guys. Turns out it was the police, and they saved the day. I don't know how or who called them, but they were here, and everything was okay now. When we got out, the whole neighborhood was standing outside my house. And it turns out that they were 2 bad guys, and when they grabbed my mom and dad, each one of them had a gun. My mom set herself free and ran to the street. She told me that she didn't care if they shot her, because she'd get to the street and be screaming for help anyway. Then she started screaming to cars who were passing by, and she made damn sure they stopped and called the cops. They got one of the thieves, and the other one escaped. When we told the cops that we had our home painted by someone the night and the week before, they told us that this was planned. And that's why they marked our house, because it was unlocked, and someone told them we had money and jewels. So they watched us for like 1 or 2 weeks until they decided to do this. After that, we got an electric fence, and never ever left the door unlocked again. My sis was shocked for a while, and she got scared very easily. But she got through that now. I'll never forget that day, and I don't wish this on anyone. 3. This literally just happened, and I'm still recovering. Background. I live in a small tourist town that is usually dead except for payday weekends. I work night shifts, so it's not uncommon for me to be walking home alone around 1 a.m. I always walk on the main roads with lots of light, and most nights I have music on. I know. I'm also early 20s, 5'8", and around 125 to 130 pounds. Tonight, I left work and started my walk home like normal. I see one of my co-workers, young teenage girl I get along with well, hanging out with a bunch of her friends. I wave and continue on. As I walk past a group of guys outside Timmy's, and one of them smiles at me. Me being Canadian, I smile back. He took this as an invitation and starts following me, asking questions. At this point, I have paused my music and still pretend not to hear him. He stops following me and shouts, "Nice ass, love." And I think that's that. I was wrong. 2 minutes later, he appears next to me on a bike, continuing to ask questions. I politely take out one earbud and call my fiancé, but no answer since he's at work too. I text my co-worker to call me immediately. He starts asking if he is creeping me out, and I very bluntly say that I'd like him to leave me alone, and that the whole situation is creepy. My co-worker finally calls, and I start talking as if they were my best friend. The conversation went like this. Me: "Hey, I'm so glad you called. Where are you, man?" "Is that your man? 'Cause I'm gonna steal you away from him." Co-worker: "You just saw me, what's wrong?" Me: "Oh, I'm just glad you got home safe." Co-worker: "I don't understand." Man: Nice hips. Childbearing hips. Where do you work?" Me to man: "Down over there. Take a gas and walk there." Co-worker: "Are you in trouble?" Me: "Oh, yes, honey. It's totally fine. I have no problem you borrowing that stuff." Co-worker: "I'm on my way to you. You stay on First Street." Man: "You weren't very nice to me." "Why are you nice to her?" "I'm going to steal you away from her too." Me pretending not to hear: "Oh, totally, honey. You should do it. Quick, before someone snags it on you. Don't want to miss your dream home." Man: "Do you have kids?" Me to man, taken off guard: "Yes." Man: So yummy. I hope I'm not freaking you out." Me to man: "Yes, you are." Co-worker: "Okay, I'm on a bike with my friends, and half a block behind you. I've got the police on the phone. Where's your turn?" Me: "Oh, thanks, hon. It's the Rexall one." Co-worker: "Okay, so it's street name." Me: "Yep." Man: "I want to see that ass wiggle." The man drops behind and starts speeding up, so he gives me no choice but to speed walk or get hit by his bike. At this point, I have to either make my turn down my street or keep going and double back. Before I can act, he sees his friends up ahead and races off to them. I book it down my street, telling my co-worker what's going on. They are still about a block behind me, and I have 3 to go before I reach my house. I don't see or hear him for 2 blocks, and I think I'm safe. Again, I was wrong. Out of nowhere, the man jumps in front of me and grabs my purse and arm, dragging me towards the bushes, yelling about my hips, and he has to steal me. He looks me dead in the eyes and says something I'll never forget. "You weren't my first, but I'll be your last." I'm screaming and pulling away from him, but he is stronger. Thank God that my co-worker and her friends race towards me and finally separate him from me. The man runs back into the bushes, and the girl on the phone with the police gives a full description of what just happened. I don't know how long I stood there, just shaking and crying. But the next thing I remember is my co-worker taking my phone and my purse and guiding me to sit on the curb while the cop car pulls up and everyone gives statements. Someone throws a sweater over me and the officer is trying to question me, asking if I had ever seen him, what he wanted, if he gave me any personal information, any identifiable marks, etc. I answer as best I can, and the officer takes me home. The officer was very sweet. He let my co-worker come with me, and doesn't leave until he is sure I'm settling in with a promise that they will do drive-bys all night. I call my fiancée back from a gig, and my co-worker stays with me until he got home. I'm writing this now, wrapped up in a blanket with hot cocoa, with a large amount of Baileys, and hoping that I never meet that creep again. Hey everyone, Hellfreezer here, and thank you very much for listening to 3 True Scary Stories, episode 97. Well, here we are on a Sunday once again, heading into another week as I totally pretend I'm not recording this late on Thursday night. Nothing special planned this week, it'll just be the usual amount of videos. I've started sending messages out a bit earlier to make sure I'm not struggling to get my paranormal and so on like I was last week. I was a bit lax last week, and I really must stop doing that. All caught up now with sending out emails and so on, so it should be a better week this week. If you have any thoughts or ideas for themed videos you'd like me to try, then put them in the comments below. I'll see what I can rustle up. Okay, I'm going to jet now. Sorry, it's going to be a short outro this week. Got a few things I want to get a jump on. So until next time, thank you very much for listening, and take very good care of yourselves.